Same one? So here's the hint that might tell you whether it's yours or not. It is a software and a manual that's kept on this, and it's for something called Black Magic Design. I mean, don't read anything into it. That's just the title, Black Magic Design. So now you may be ashamed to claim it, but it's yours. So I'll put it here, and then maybe someone will claim. All right, so this is the chance for our, we've had question and answers. So we're here to give such answers as we can, and we have a number of questions. People on the panel here today are Linda Oliveira, who is the current president of the Australian section and has been past vice president, international vice president here at Adyar. We have Vic Hao Chin, who is a past president of the Philippine section and also the editor and compiler of the chronological Mahatma letters and other publications. So we're here to try and do the best that we can to answer such questions as you have. We have a couple of relatively challenging questions in here, so we're going to have to, those are the ones I will give to Vic and to Linda. All right, so during this convention, there has been occasional reference to global warming and climate change. How does this looming crisis, which will affect life on Earth for generations to come, inform the work of the Theosophical Society and its members? So the question relates to global conditions that are impending. What is the effect upon the work that we have to do in the Theosophical Society? Any thoughts? To the right or to the left?
Well, perhaps when we consider that Theosophy has at its very heart unity, what the Theosophical Society has to offer is perennially relevant to the human condition in all its aspects. Unity cannot be stressed strongly enough, and if we can show to people that there are practical ways of living which can help to honour the unity which is behind all life, and therefore also honour our planet, then we will be helping in a particular way to help address this issue of climate change. People can see this happening very strongly in different countries. But I think it is important for us as individuals and for people to who come into contact with the Theosophical Society to be made aware that they can make practical decisions in their lives and in their general way of looking at the world, which can impact not only the way in which they live, but therefore also those lives around them as well.
Vic, any thoughts?
I think this is a universal problem that all must face, not just members of the TS, but everybody here on Earth. And I think the Theosophical Society, in one way or another, should be somehow involved in helping making this world a better place physically. In the Philippines, we have organized a separate foundation called Green Earth Foundation for this purpose. And we published or reprinted a book called Help Save the Earth. And it is addressed to this issue of global warming as well as other issues connected with making this world a better place.
Just to add to what's been said, I would say that probably if in fact all indications are correct, a certain degree of the impending difficulties at this late stage may be unavoidable. That being the case, it does seem that one of the things that the Theosophical teachings particularly offer is this idea of self-responsibility, so that in any given situation there are always choices that we have the capacity to make. We have examples of Theosophists, or even people who have become Theosophists while they were imprisoned. And in that particular condition, which tends to be one of the most negative of conditions that you can find yourself in, you have people who in that setting are able to bring a lighted sort of presence. So I think it works on two levels. Obviously, anyone who embraces this idea that there's one life has to commit to sustaining that one life. So on that level, we do all that we can. On other levels, part of the practice of Theosophy is attuning ourselves to this deeper presence or this higher self that can have very positive effects no matter what the outward circumstances are. So we do what we can.
Can I add something? I'd just like to add something. There is an international Theosophy science group that publishes a quarterly newsletter called Researches Relevant to Theosophy. And if you send your email to the website, you will receive it for free quarterly. It contains news and researches on this, and to make us become familiar with these issues and perhaps what we can do. The website is called, what is it, Jacques? Theosophy? Theoscience.org. Theoscience.org. Then you can subscribe from there and you'll receive quarterly issues of this publication.
The TS has a strong connection to the written word and to books. This has served us well, but perhaps only connected to seekers who gravitate to this medium. As we seek to grow and connect with young and old, to connect them to the ageless wisdom, trying to condense it, what efforts can be done to have a wider reach and approachability to the wealth of wisdom that's available. And then examples are given: YouTube, Facebook, website, online forums. So the historical connection that we have with the written word and with, I think, the spoken word also in books is being suggested as only one medium of approach to the seekers.
I think evidently the world is changing and has changed a lot in the last 30 years. And I fully agree that we must adopt our ways of communication through new means, and the internet has been the major game changer. In our section, we are very fortunate to have a very active group of young people who understand this much, much better than we, the older members, do. And they have created avenues through Facebook, Messenger, Viber, and so on, in order to reach out. And then we are beginning to see how this possibility has opened up new dimensions of reaching the public. And I would encourage all our sections to do so. And ask your young people to start something. Maybe it will work, maybe it will not, but most probably it will work, and it will do more effective work in reaching out, not only to young people, but also even to those who are older, who are connected to the internet. And it just needs some of the older people to help guide them so that they don't cross invisible borders. But we think that when they are grounded in Theosophy, they'll not cross those invisible borders where they go into weird things. But I think it's something very important for our lodges and sections to do, because in many countries, the membership of the TS is declining because the membership is almost all above middle age, and that's not a very good thing for the TS in the future.
it does seem that at the outset of this Theosophical movement, back in the days when it was founded, the people who were involved at that time were very far-seeing and very wise in their approaches. And so at that time, of course, books and the written word in a physical manner was the best way to reach the largest audience of people. And so that was the approach. Obviously, things change over time, and other opportunities present themselves. So I think, as Vic was saying, that's one of the things that we do have to continually avail ourselves of, and allow for those who have some depth of knowledge to come forward and to share their resources. Here at Adyar, we have had a redesign of our, well, we had no website. Well, we had a dormant website for a while, but then we had a very good design, and of course, now that's been 3 years ago, and 3 years in internet terms is something like at least a manvantara. So now we're having to redesign that. But there's a constant flow of new means that become available, and we shouldn't be frightened of trying to reach people where we find them.
Yes, I don't have a great deal to add. Perhaps what we need to find is some kind of a middle way, because many members still appreciate very greatly the value of books. Book study groups within the Theosophical Society can be richly rewarding for people. At the same time, the world has changed enormously, and I think that every section really needs to not just have a website, but find meaningful ways of using social media as well. And as has been suggested, younger members can become very engaged in this kind of thing. If we don't speak to the world using current methods of communication, then our voice as a society will become even smaller in a world with a further growing population. So we need to be very, very mindful of these things, and I think at the same time preserve and nurture the beautiful body of literature that we have. One of the wonderful facilities now is e-books for those who don't necessarily want to have printed copies of books, and Theosophy World as a website is doing the TS a wonderful service by becoming an increasing repository of a very nice selection of e-books which can simply be downloaded onto your computers.
What is that, John? Theosophy World dot... Pardon me. Theosophy.world. Those of you who have access to your computers who haven't looked into it, by all means you should. It is a wealth of resources of all different types. Theosophy.world. All right, so here's a question that has a little bit of a poetic introduction. Adyar, the heart of the Theosophical Society, seems today to be beating to the tune of comfort, glitter, and superficiality. Is it not our responsibility to give attention to the means as well as the end of preserving it as an oasis of simplicity and tranquility in a world of noise and unconscious materialism? So probably that's one that I should take. I think probably the questioner might have been influenced by the Disneyland aspect of Blavatsky Bungalow. Maybe that's it. The idea that there were changing colored lights on the building rather than just white lights. Perhaps, I don't know. But I can assure you that even with Blavatsky Bungalow, those lights will be going at slower speeds, and there will be different colors, and if there are lights that seem to be distasteful to others, we can always take those colors out of the spectrum. So if it's the lights, okay. As far as comfort and glitter, obviously the glitter has to be the lights, because otherwise I don't see much glitter anywhere else. The comfort sorts of items that we have tried to institute are, we've tried for basic comforts, honestly. One of the things that became very apparent with our conventions, all of us know how these sessions go. So there's a session in the morning, a break, a session later on, a break, a session later on, a break. So we would have people, you could probably walk an easy 4 to 5 miles a day just coming to and from these convention meetings. And as I have observed it, much like myself, I'm starting to notice a little bit more gray hair among our members who I see out walking, sometimes diligently limping their way to these meetings. So in the interest, not just of comfort, but in the interest of easing the suffering of some of our members, we put in these buses. And so people now can ride back and forth. There are probably a couple of different views. I mean, for some people there is the view that unless there is some degree of pain or suffering involved, then this path is not real. Others might have the view that pain and suffering we're going to find anywhere and anyway, and so we don't need to increase it by inviting you here to Adyar. So that's been some of the thinking. It's not that we're trying to become superficial. A lot of the things that we have here in terms of accommodations, one of the things you probably may have noticed, maybe not, the number of people who are here has gone down. About 100 less than what has been normal. And the reason behind that has been that the accommodations that we provided were not satisfactory. And as a result of that, it was clear to us here that we did not want to put people up in accommodations that were substandard, so we would have less of them. The ones that were better quality would be the ones that we would offer. And so that puts a certain limit on the number of people who can necessarily attend. So those sorts of things have been things that we've been trying to be conscious of. Perhaps comfort, perhaps people view it as an excess of comfort. I certainly don't, and that's a rare complaint for me to hear from people coming to Adyar, to the Adyar conference, that there's too much comfort. So that's my answer. I don't know if anybody else wants to touch it.
Could I add something? I think perhaps perceptions of what seems to be superficiality and too much emphasis on comfort aside, and people may differ on that. The most important thing perhaps about Adyar is it is a flaming spiritual heart of the Theosophical Society worldwide. And I imagine that many people here during this convention feel that very much. One can be very invigorated and inspired by the beautiful energies here and take them back around the world for the work. So there is the form side, there are decisions made to improve certain buildings and perhaps in the process make things more comfortable for people. And there's also that consciousness which is somehow seems to be eternal, which is that inner heart of Adyar. That is there, that is very real, and that is also something which I think will not be changed in any way because of external changes on the compound here.
I should also say that when a lot of these structures here that we are in the process of renovating, that actually falls into the next question as well. when those things were erected, for instance, Leadbeater Chambers was put up by, that was during Annie Besant's time. And she was quite a visionary and quite a person of her time. That particular building, it was the first concrete and reinforced concrete building of that type in all of India that was put up. It was on the cutting edge of technology of the time, and that's sort of the inheritance of what we have received. In a certain sense, we have been given something, and I think unless it is treated properly on our part, that's a little bit disrespectful to those who have given it to us. And so I think it is our responsibility, where you have been given something that is beautiful, to not allow it to become ugly, at a minimum. And so that's a point of view. Everyone doesn't have to share that, but I think it's, to my point of view, if we don't minimally maintain, if not improve, what has been given to us, then I don't think we're treating our inheritance properly. Respected panel, please comment on your perspective about the renovations at Adyar and their usefulness for the future of the TS. I think I said a little something, maybe. No? No, he shook it off.
That's the same question.
It's the same.
Well, yes, it's simply a question of, I think we need to look after things. In our homes, I presume that we look after the objects around us, that we look after our homes, our houses. Similarly, this international home of the Theosophical Society, I believe, needs to be maintained well, and we have particular expertise at this time which is helping us to do some very thorough renovations. I think that Blavatsky Bungalow is an outstanding jewel and an example of how something can be very well looked after and restored and preserved. I think by looking after the buildings here on this compound as well as possible, we are indeed honouring this as the heart of the Theosophical Society, both spiritually and physically.
I suppose that a principle would be simply functionality. In other words, we're here to attend convention. We want to have accommodations which would not be too inconvenient, and we don't have to be superficial, glittery, or what, but functional. I remember two people whom I knew who came for the first time here. On the first evening, actually at Leadbeater's chamber, they were quite horrified at what they experienced, and they left and stayed in a hotel outside. So we hope that we could avoid those kinds of experiences. So the minimum necessities, I think, should be attended to. We don't have to be too expensive or too, the designs need not be too excessive, but we should make it a comfortable place to be in as we do our work here in the TS.
And just because I have a certain hand in bringing that sort of thing about, I can assure you that we will not make it too comfortable for you. So, have no fear. There are few members of the Theosophical Society in the world. Why not attract to the Theosophical Society? What is the reason for that? Please give suggestion for that. So the idea, I think, is that there are few members. The membership in the Theosophical Society worldwide is a few, and why don't we attract more people to it? And what's the reason?
I think there are two important, that's a complex question, but there are two aspects which I think we should give attention to. The first one is that, in my opinion, in the past more than 50 years, the Theosophical Society has been rather weak in applying Theosophy. In other words, we have the ideas very clear for the past more than 100 years, but translating them into addressing the issues of society and the individual, we have not been able to do quite effectively for the past more than 50 years. During the time of Annie Besant, this was her advocacy, to bring it down to the lives of people, individuals, societies, families, education. And she organized so many leagues and movements and groups like the Sons of India, the Daughters of India, a league for letter writing, a league for parenting, and so on, so many of them. And so Theosophy became a living philosophy that attracted people, not only just members, but people outside. But somehow this faded away after she died, and we went back to the intellectual level of Theosophy. I think this is a definite weakness on our part. We should do something about it. The second aspect is that as the world changes, the modes of communication, the values, the cultures have changed. And we must adopt the mode of communication as the world changes. And here we are addressing mainly the way of life of each incoming generation, which means that we have to be sensitive or be cognizant of what the younger generation, how the younger generation looks at things, and the mode of communication by them. And hence, I think the second facet is that we should give attention to bring the message of Theosophy to young people, to each succeeding generation. When we fail here, then what we will have is just declining relevance to the world, because in the next generation, they don't understand anymore what we are talking about, because there is now a gap of communication between them, their generation, and ours. Last year, I was invited to go to tour, to have a lecture tour in a country, and I went to 9 different cities and lodges, and I noted that among the audience, the average age was 65 or more, and there was no one who was younger than 40. And the complaint I kept on hearing from the lodges is that their membership is declining, very few people attend, no young people attend, and they're closing up certain parts of the buildings, selling off part of their properties because no one is taking care of them. Now I think this is very sad, because we have a very important message to give to the world. But I believe that we must first demonstrate it to the world that it is something that is workable, something that is relevant. We must do it ourselves. And then when people see that this thing which we call Theosophy really applies to the lives of individuals and society, then they will see that there is something to learn from here, and they'll become interested. So 2 things. One is applied Theosophy, and the second is to address the message to young people, the next generation.
Perhaps I can add a little to that. I think Vic's points are very valid ones. When the Theosophical Society entered the world stage, it was unique, it was groundbreaking, it caused a sensation. The founders caused a sensation in the world with this reintroduction of the divine wisdom, also to Western countries. Since that time, many other spiritual organizations have developed and are offering certain things to individuals as well. So now, if you like, instead of being a big fish in a small pond, we're now a small fish in a very big pond. Hence, the absolute necessity of making our voice heard as well as we can, using the means of our times. A second reason which might contribute to this as well is the lodges and what they are actually presenting, and whether people are actually made to feel really welcome when they come to lodges. It's very easy to perhaps stick together and speak to the people one knows instead of approaching newcomers. But newcomers need to be really embraced and to feel welcome. A third factor also seems to be a kind of change in values. I think that less people these days are willing to actually join an organisation and commit to it. There seems to be a lack of commitment by people. Perhaps their lives seem very busy in other ways and they don't want to actually take that step. They may be revolving around the Theosophical societies, using libraries, coming to some talks, looking at websites, but don't somehow want to take that step of commitment. And one other factor I might add to all of this is Kali Yuga. It is very, very strong. The grasp of materialism on this world in an extreme sense is just becoming more and more noticeable. So here we are, this gem of a society with pure gold to give the world, but we're also working against these incredibly strong forces of ever deeper materialism at this time. So we have more to work against, and that should challenge us to rise more and do whatever we can to make this society and its marvelous message known.
Okay. This question relates to the timing for the actual convention, the dates. So the suggestion here is that the dates from the 25th to the 25th of December to the 31st of December are more convenient instead of the 31st to the 5th of January. So please think about timings of the convention. It is better to change the convention timings instead of the 31st to the 5th. Better to change it to the 25th of December to the 31st. And that is because these are days in which they are holidays for the here in India. And one of the things that I do understand is that as a result of it being a holiday season, that also having it not begin on the 25th of December influences the ability of younger students to come during this time. And so that's something that is a very real issue. One of the things that, the dates were changed, and I think this was about 4 or 5 years ago, about 4 years ago. The dates were changed from December 25th to December 31st. Our convention has to our General Council meeting has to take place before the end of the year. So it has to take place before we reach January 1st. That's just a technical detail. But for 125 years, the convention had been held on December 25th. Now, December 25th, perhaps in India, is another day on the calendar. But for anybody who's coming from any country in the Western world, Europe, America, Latin America, Australia, New Zealand, all of those, which were more Christian-focused countries, 25th of December is Christmas Day. And I don't think the import of that carries, unless that's something that is a celebration that you're familiar with. Certainly in the United States, I know that Christmas Day is probably the main day that you can say that families get together. So for 125 years, people who have been devoted to the Theosophical Society, living in the Western world, have elected to leave families behind on, this most important day of the year there, and to come here to partake in this convention. But that's a lot to ask. I mean, we don't have quite as many holidays in the U.S. as we have here in India. And so to walk away from family gatherings at that time was something that it was thought would be well to shift. And so that was the reasoning behind that. It was a difficult choice also because we do know that there's a holiday period that takes place during that time here in India. So that's the reasoning behind it. It's a lot of the members of my general council were very, very much opposed to coming here on Christmas Day. And based on that, it's something where we have to respect the wishes of the rest of the world as well. Obviously a brilliant response, but probably also unsatisfactory for those whose kids can't come during these holidays. I get it. But the problem with a lot of these things is that there is, in fact, no perfect date. And so we did the one date for 125 years. Let's do this one let's try for another 20, say, and see how that works, then we can come back and talk about it. That's a joke, by the way. All right. Actually, this is the exact same question. So it's not, that thought is out there. Dear brothers, can we set apart one day during the convention exclusively for the study and understanding of J. Krishnamurti's teachings? So set aside a day during the course of the convention to focus on Krishnamurti's teachings. Any thoughts?
Well, I guess this also relates to the nature of the Theosophical Society, which in my understanding at least does not give undue prominence to any one teacher or teachings. We are an inquiry-based society. We embrace different writings, different teachers, different perspectives. The program for the International Convention is set at the international headquarters, and I presume there's a particular reason why we don't devote one day to the study of teachings by somebody such as Krishnaji, much as I am very drawn to many of the things that he has said.
Well, I suppose that topics along the teachings of Krishnamurti can be included. Whether it's going to be one day or every year, probably that's another issue. But that I would personally go for encouraging more and more members of the TS to study the teachings of Krishnamurti. But that's something, as Linda was saying, something which need not be fixed or a necessary part. Although before, I remember when Krishnamurti was alive, and then he was giving talks in the Santa Vihar. Whenever he has talks, we don't have sessions here in the convention. It's suspended because it allows people to go over there. So that's how much the conventions also respected the talks and teachings of Krishnamurti. So without having to fix it in a kind of set date or time, I would say that we should all be encouraged to study that aspect of the teachings.
I could just add that during the course of the convention, every time we make sure that there are spaces, blocks of time that you can utilize as you choose. So that might be something where if someone were so motivated, they could organize an opportunity for all this to come together and look into the teachings of Krishnamurti. We have a number of open spaces during our timings for this convention. Why does human evolution appear to proceed so slowly? There's a few questions here. Wait. Why does human evolution appear to proceed so slowly? What are the less tangible aspects of our work? Have the masters stopped communicating with the TS and its members? How can we bring beauty into our lives? So of those 4 questions, take your pick.
Do you want to take one first, Pete?
Do you remember?
On the second question about what are the less tangible aspects of our work, I think there are so many, and I think this is where the TS is especially, how do I say, well, good at, meaning the teachings can become so abstract and so intangible that it is out of the reach of the majority of people. But we have a very strong body of literature and teachings on this. We need not discuss about what those are. Just go to the secret doctrine, and I think you'll appreciate these less tangible things in our teachings. But what I'm more concerned about is actually the more tangible things in our teachings. And as I mentioned earlier, I have been feeling that we are weak in applied theosophy. We should make theosophy a living philosophy, something that can be felt and seen by individuals, by families, by corporations, by educators, by politicians. And here, I think we should devote more time to this, to the more tangible things, because the intangible things are already there, very strong, and it is the ground of our work in the Theosophical Society. How to bring it out into the world, I think, is the call of modern times, of our times, and maybe for all times. As each generation would change its culture, way of life, then the wisdom should adapt itself to those changes in culture and way of life. So while we do have a very strong intangible set of teachings and even way of life, but I think we should not neglect the tangible aspects.
The question, have the masters stopped communicating with the TS and its members? Well, communication can take various forms. It is well known that holy ones wrote letters to individual members of the society in years gone by. Perhaps they are still writing to some individuals, but those individuals don't want to say anything. But maybe, if they have not written any more letters, it is because members have not yet assimilated fully what they have taught through the letters. There's a very great deal to consider, to study, to go into in depth in the material provided in those letters. In fact, one would think that this would be lifetimes of work for a given human soul. Another point, though, too, is that communication, if the assumption is that this communication is to be through letters, communication takes place in different ways. And I think part of the work of the holy ones is to throw out elevating influences which may be caught up by higher minds and made into something really purposeful and useful. So no doubt there are other ways in which the Holy Ones still do communicate, and I'm absolutely convinced that they are still behind the Theosophical Society and its worldwide work, and very much also associated with this beautiful centre here.
Can I just a thought about the question answered by Linda about the masters and their communication. Two things come to my mind. The first is that during the last quarter of the last century, of the 19th century, it was, I think, a very special occasion in the history of humanity when the adepts decided to come out to the public arena. It is something that is very, very rare, and my understanding is that they decided to come out publicly within a certain period of time in order to stimulate something in humanity. And after that period, they stopped it and then they withdrew. And it seems that they don't do that very often. In fact, very rarely, and only for certain purposes when they go public. The second facet which comes to my mind is that there is enough writing, hints, teachings given out by the Mahatmas that to ask them to do it again for our benefit might be a waste of time for them. In other words, what can be done in order for us to go nearer to the teachers? It is not dependent on the teachers, but it is dependent on us. And then the guidelines for this, I think, have been very clearly written in the writings of the Mahatmas and HPD. And hence, it's now the ball is in our hands, so to speak. What do we do in order to qualify ourselves for that? Rather than ask why they are not communicating, we probably should ask, am I qualified for such an opportunity to be in touch with them or to directly learn from them?
Can we make an attempt to approach the cash-rich multinational corporate houses, both in India and abroad, seeking donations with an earnest appeal in our development works planned in the next decade? Okay, so this is a thought for, again, this is a thought toward improving the material aspect of the campus here. One of the things that it does seem is true is that whatever sort of activity that we engage in, whether it be renovation or whether it be the work that we're doing now in opening a new school, which is focused on a theosophical education, that the resources required seem to be attracted. That seems to be the way it is. I know during Annie Besant's time, she was such a person that at the end of every year, she insisted that everything be spent and then start fresh from the new year. It's not the sort of advice that most of us would embrace, but for her, the idea that the work that we are doing is in tune with the work of the masters of the wisdom, and that it will be provided for was something that she just demonstrated from moment to moment. Quite honestly, the Theosophical Society, Adyar, as it exists today in its physical structure, which is to say with its various campuses in different cities around the world,
largely owes itself to Annie Besant. She became president in 1908, I think it is, and this Adyar estate was 24 or 26 acres. 3 or 4 years later, it was 260 acres. Annie Besant has given away more property than the Theosophical Society has for other sorts of causes. If you go downtown in Chennai, the Young Men's Indian Association was a building that was built and donated from gifts that were given to Annie Besant. So the idea is that, yes, all around the world there are people whose particular dharma, whose particular life pattern is not the study of theosophy or the involvement in the work of the Theosophical Society, but who value that work and find ways to give resources toward that. And so that's something that I would expect to continue. The only time it would cease to happen is when we cease to be true to the mission that we have been established for.
Just a thought on this matter. In more than 30 years of working on theosophical projects, I have realized, and it has been validated time and again, that money follows projects and not the other way around. In other words, the problem is not the money, but the problem is the lack of worthwhile projects. When projects are worthwhile, there's a lot of free fund around the world which are available, and they're looking for worthy projects. Just look at there's a huge list of funding sources published by many organizations that are looking for worthy projects, and they're there. Do we qualify for this kind of funding? It depends on us. And there have been many projects I've seen in the theosophical world, which when started in a very humble way, but very worthwhile, people come forward in order to donate not only money, but also their time, their resources, their expertise. And hence I think we should be more concerned about, do we have worthwhile projects? If we do, I'm almost sure that the funding will come.
I should mention, last night we had our just update on the renovation project that we're undertaking here. And before could get down off of the stage, people had come forward to offer another $25,000 US toward that project. So it's not a question of the inaccessibility or unavailability of resources. Resources are everywhere. But we have to create the conditions that allow for the flow of those resources. And then, all the rest, we're okay. But we just have to be able to focus on what it is that we came here. What is the mission of the Theosophical Society? And develop those ways of applying that to the world around us. And I have no doubt that we will be in everything that is required will rise up to meet us. All right, so this is a question. I think probably what I will do is I will generalize the question because it's a little bit specific. So the idea that's suggested, how to reduce the ego of office bearers. I don't take it personally. And actually it wasn't, just so you know, it wasn't about the international society. It was about another group of organization. But the idea, how to reduce the ego of office bearers such as president and secretaries. But it's not about Adyar. So the idea that's expressed is they do not want to leave the positions they are holding, and also those who occupy, it's a little bit, they are not behaving properly, favoritism, things like that. Okay, so the idea being, let's take a more universalized question. Is there something about holding office which can have the effect of bringing out personality traits which are unfavorable to our development or to the growth of the organization we represent? Let me just say one thing. As international president of the Theosophical Society, probably all of you know that every president of the Theosophical Society has died in office, except Jinarajadasa, who knew he was dying and then stepped out and handed it on to Sri Ram. But every international president has died in office. Now, imagine my feeling when elected to this position. So, but one thing that I did promise was that I'll be the first. And part of the justification for that is this. In talking with my general counsel, I wanted to have the rules changed for the Theosophical Society because it allows for a person to maintain an office. It's a 7-year term for the president, but you can run for as many 7-year terms as you choose. And I do believe that every president who has ever held this position has had it in their mind and has had it in their heart that when the time came that they weren't as effective due to age or due to conditions, that they would step aside. They would know. But one of the signs that the time has come is that you no longer recognize that the time has come. That's the sign. And so I threatened my general counsel. My mother is 100 years old. My father, if it wasn't for a sudden stroke, he died at 92. Everybody in my family lives a long, long time. So in talking with my general counsel, I said, now here's your choice. Count on me to know when I can step aside, or put in some term limits so that I'm not just wandering around the office asking, who am I, and making decisions on behalf of the Theosophical Society. It's a position, all of these positions are positions that are, there's substantial responsibility, but the responsibility is to the members, to the organization, to the mission. And it's something that requires not just wisdom, but it requires energy. And, you know, I would not have thought this when I was younger, but I do find that your energy levels have a tendency to diminish as time goes on. Did somebody say yes? So these are things that you have to take into account. This is a vibrant organization, has always been. So you have to always provide for vibrant leadership. And I think that to say that there will be periodic changes in that is an expression of the confidence that the people, the members of the society, are doing the necessary work to assume such levels of responsibility. And to demand that there be periodic changes also demands that there be attention to those membership and a succession. And so I think that that's speaking for the international society, but I think it's also true at the levels of our federations. To hold on to an office for 20, 30 years, probably at a certain point, you should let go and allow for somebody else to come in.
I think one of the areas that we all must look into whether it's on a large level, national level, or international level, is that there must always be a plan for succession. It should be a definite plan. It is just not accidental that somebody can take over, because if none, then the person who is sitting there will be asked to keep on sitting for 20, 30 years because there's no plan. Succession, whether it's in corporations, in organizations, in countries, are planned. And hence the leader, I think, of each lodge or its section must already nurture younger people to be able to come up to leadership positions in time. And this should be a deliberate practice and not just by accident.
I'd like to address this question from the point of view of the individual. When a member of the Theosophical Society finds themselves in some kind of office, there is usually a perceived power of some sort associated with that office. I often think that it's more important to think about one's responsibility than any possible power that one has, because power or perceived power can and has been abused, sadly. The other thing which is very important for anyone who does hold an office at any level of the organisation is self-examination. To be aware of how we are using the responsibilities we have, to be aware of the people we are working with and how we treat them, which is incredibly important. I think that the importance of kindness cannot be spoken about often enough. Just to be kind to our fellow human beings, to treat them well, to treat any employees in our care well, to treat our colleagues well, other members well, and newcomers well. And if we can watch ourselves in our interactions, in relationships, then perhaps the sorts of problems that are talked about in this question will simply fall away. Because at the end of the day, regardless of what office we occupy, we are who we are, and we have to look ourselves in the face and consider just what we are doing, how we are doing it, and how we are treating others. Just one slightly more humorous aspect to this. I sometimes think, wouldn't it be nice if there was an app that we could install on our smartphones, and we could open that up, and that would help us to behave very nicely, a behaviour app. Unfortunately, we don't have one of those yet, so maybe we have to be that app ourselves.
Okay. So I think that probably brings our time to a close. So for those of you who are involved in technology at any level, you have the marching order, get that app going, develop it. But I want to thank you all for being here. I want to thank my co-panelists. I have to say I very much enjoyed our time together. It was very good, and I hope it was something that was meaningful for you all as well. So thank you. The session is closed.